Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time we got a few questions, most of which are going to be Skeleton Crew related with the finale coming up tonight, and yes, my review for that should be up sometime late tonight, sometime a few hours after the episode drops. But we're actually going to kick it off with a question more about The Mandalorian and Disney in general, and it comes to us from Andrew JS, who asked, "Hey Thor, you mentioned something I thought was interesting. The vast majority of Disney projects, including legacy characters/content, have been poor to abysmal. Sequels, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, Book of Boba Fett. However, their original content has been consistently decent to phenomenal. Mando, Rogue One, Andor, Skeleton Crew, Bad Batch, Star Wars Fallen Order, with a big exception of The Acolyte. I think this highlights that the higher-ups at Disney/Lucasfilm pure negative impact on the brand by being too involved in the flashier projects. Mando highlights this perfectly, with Season 3 feeling much worse than the first two, conveniently after it became a big IP and moneymaker. Just wondering what your thoughts were." And I absolutely think that The Mandalorian Season 3 is the perfect example of Disney meddling once they realized what they had on their hands. They saw the success of the first two seasons, they saw how much money it was making in merchandise, they saw the subscription numbers, the viewership numbers, and said, we need more of that. There is no way, after how Season 2 ends of course, there is no way we can have a season of this show without the little green guy and the shiny guy in the armor together, and that's exactly what they made happen. I can't believe that Jon Favreau and Filoni and everybody involved in The Mandalorian who cares about the story thought it was good for the story to have those characters brought back together immediately, and so immediately that it happened in a totally different show, so that if you just watched The Mandalorian, if you didn't watch the Book of Boba Fett and you fired up Season 3, you were probably very confused to see them back together. I'm sorry, but that is, again, just kind of poor storytelling and kind of making the assumption that you're gonna watch a different show, even though theoretically it should have, well, not nothing to do with The Mandalorian, since they are set in the same time period and kind of involve the same characters, but you shouldn't have to watch the Book of Boba Fett to get a major plot point for Season 3 of The Mandalorian, to know why they came back together after you watched 2 seasons of Mando looking for a Jedi in order to train Grogu, and then giving him to Luke, and they go off together, and suddenly you fire up Season 3, and they're just back together. But anyway, despite the fact that, yes, Jon Favreau has even said it was his idea to bring them back together so quickly, I don't believe it. I think that was the Disney execs looking at it and saying, we can't do a season of them apart, bring them back together, I don't care how you have to do it, and then the story suffers. We ended up with a pretty subpar season of The Mandalorian. In fact, it was more Bo-Katan as The Mandalorian than Din Djarin. And when you really step back and look at it, you could ask yourself, just what role did Grogu coming back even play? Yes, it played some degree. There was the whole thing with him sensing the mythosaur, and he had a little subplot there with the armorer, and we see some of his backstory. There were things there with him, don't get me wrong. But if you remove him from the season, it still functions just the same way. He's just kind of there because we need him and Mando together in order to sell subscriptions and to sell merchandise, not because he needed to be there for the story. And I think the original idea was for him to come back maybe at the end of this season or maybe in Season 4. But I also think that Disney realized that they could turn this into a Mando-verse, that it wasn't just one series, that they could have all these series and lead into movies, and they could do this whole thing with it, kind of like the MCU, kind of like a mini version of the MCU within the larger Star Wars franchise. And all these ideas came from Disney, were sent down to Lucasfilm, to Favreau, Filoni, and they tried to make it happen, and here we are. Now, relating all that back to Skeleton Crew, do I think they were more hands-off because this is a show that maybe they didn't expect too much from, even though if they're going to greenlight a show, they're probably, or you would definitely think, expecting something from it. You don't greenlight something that isn't going to be profitable or just good for the franchise in general, so they probably, when they said, yeah, make this show after the initial pitch, they probably thought this was something, and then we heard, and who knows how true it is, but we had heard that they took a look at what it was and they didn't like it, or they didn't know what it was supposed to be or what they were going to even do with it necessarily. And then it got delayed like a year and potentially got reworked, even though I don't think it did. I don't think there's any signs of it, as I've discussed before. I don't think you watch it and go, oh, I can see where they may have changed things or inserted scenes or cut something or anything like that. It feels very, very tight in the editing department. But anyway, no, I don't think they were very hands-on with Skeleton Crew, and that is probably one of the reasons it turned out better, even though, again, they did watch it, apparently, and thought it wasn't very good, which does mean they probably don't have any clue what Star Wars is or is supposed to be in the first place, which then relates back to why the shows that they maybe are more hands-on with, why they turn out so bad, or we're wondering what is going on with this. How can you miss the mark so badly with a Kenobi series or with Boba Fett, when the people at the top don't even know what a Kenobi series or Boba Fett should look like? Alright, let's move on to this question from Decato87, who asked, Hey Thor, do you think Skeleton Crew will have the Andor effect, meaning it didn't have great viewing numbers, but people started watching after the show was done? Not only that, but they played it on network TV, on ABC, and it happened after the disappointment of Kenobi. So why do you think people aren't watching Skeleton Crew, even though those who are watching it are saying it's good? And I've kind of talked before about why I think a lot of people aren't tuning into Skeleton Crew, which has a lot to do with just the general state of Star Wars right now, people being unhappy with it, or they don't want to pay for Disney Plus, a subscription to Disney Plus just to watch this show, or maybe this show just doesn't seem to appeal to them. They watch the trailers, they've seen commercials and thought, this looks like a kid's show, I don't care about it. But anyway, I do think there could be a sort of Andor effect here, let's call it, that it doesn't start out necessarily with the greatest viewership numbers or people kind of talking about it or thinking it's even going to be good, and then it ends up actually being good. More people start tuning in, more people start talking about it, and we end up where, at least in my opinion, Andor is the most anticipated Star Wars thing in quite some time. Or I should say, Season 2 is the most anticipated thing. Now, I don't know that Skeleton Crew ultimately gets a Season 2 unless the internal numbers Disney is seeing are really, really good or continually going up, and even after the show is done, it still gets people watching it, and then maybe when Andor Season 2 does come out, and some people resubscribe to Disney Plus for it, they check it out, they like it, and the numbers are just really, really positive, again, more after the fact. Even still, when you consider the numbers we do have from Nielsen and Luminate and other places that it is not cracking the top 10, it would have to be a pretty significant improvement, because when you compare these numbers to other shows, it is just very bad, to put it bluntly. It is kind of catastrophic when you think about it, when you can look at something like The Mandalorian and see what it was pulling in terms of viewership, and this show is not even getting like a fifth of that. So yeah, I think the odds of it getting a Season 2, even though, yes, there is an Andor effect to some degree going on, at least according to the polls I've been doing, there's like a 5% increase in viewership from the first couple episodes to the latest one. So I think there absolutely is, but I don't think it's going to be good enough to kind of save the show, if you will. Alright, and the next question comes to us from Question Man, who asked, Hey Thor, sincere question here. Do you feel that, for you personally, Skeleton Crew was enjoyable enough to have warranted paying for a 2-month subscription to Disney Plus on its own merit? By that I mean independent of any other content. Would you have paid $20 to $30 for Skeleton Crew alone? Thanks. And this is a rather interesting question, or interesting way to kind of look at it, that I don't think a lot of people necessarily always do. When it comes to these streaming services, when you try to actually break it down into what you are watching versus what you are actually paying. Now for me, yeah, I'm going to be subscribed to Disney Plus just because I'm going to be subscribed to it, because it just is a big part of what I do. But on its own, would I just pay $20 to $30 to watch this? Yeah, I absolutely would. In fact, I plan on buying the 4K version when it comes out eventually, because Disney has, recently they started to release their shows on 4K and Blu-ray and all that. I have Andor and the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian already, and I will be adding this to my collection. It'll make a fine addition, you could say. But yes, I would pay that. I think it's worth $20 to $30, especially when you consider $20 to $30 is pretty much the price of going to the movies. If you're just getting your tickets, that is. No popcorn or anything else. $30 is about 2 tickets to the movies, which would be for me and my wife. So yeah, for me, it's a good 4 or 5 hours of entertainment. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it is worth that. Now, it might not be worth that to other people, and that's fine, but for me, certainly worth it. And let's now move on to this question from Sam Rude, who asked, Hey Thor, the great irony is that out of all the Star Wars Disney Plus shows, Skeleton Crew feels the most like something Lucas would have greenlit if he were still calling the shots at Lucasfilm. And yeah, I do agree with that. This show feels like what he probably wanted the Ewok movies from back in the day to be like, or feel like, something that is geared a bit more towards the younger crowd, but still has some appeal to older audiences. This in many ways does feel like something Lucas Star Wars in the fact that, yes, it kind of has something for everybody. There are life lessons in here. It's a fun adventure, and yet there are darker aspects, and there is intrigue. There is a bit of everything, and I do fully believe it is something George Lucas himself would have said, yeah, that's some good Star Wars right there. Alright, well, I think that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think of any and all of my answers to these questions, or by all means, answer them yourself, or ask a question for a future lightning response video. All you got to do is start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and ask your question, but whatever you choose to do, leave a comment below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.